you see that as like a thing that's not going away, and it's kind of just generally like eating at the foundation of America. And then what actually happens is this kind of like after America thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So basically, people have, part of that whole thing that we're describing, it predated social media, by the way. People blame it all on social media and so on. But that dynamic predated social media. There was cable news. There's other stuff. In many ways, you can trace it all the way back to there's a gigantic centralization arc up to 1950. And now we're in the middle of a huge decentralization arc that's happening even faster than the centralization. So you go, railroads and mass media and mass production and the age of the factory where like everything is choke pointed through General Motors and General Mills and General Electric, right? That's like the mid 20th century. One telephone company, AT&T, and two superpowers, US and USSR, and three television stations. Everything's choke pointed in 1950 something, and then it starts all breaking apart as you go from the transistor, cable news, the personal computer, the internet, the smartphone, cryptocurrency. It just starts disintegrating and decentralizing, And what's happened, though, is all of these institutions that were built for this giant centralizing era are not built for this era, so they're just flailing, They're massively overbuilt for what it is that we're in, And at least a lot of the Western institutions. So the question is then, what does the other side look like, right? And I think many ways you can't turn back the hands of the clock in a normal sense, but you can turn them all the way around. You can just turn it all ding, and then you start something new. And so the book, The Network State, what it's about is fundamentally finding your community online, okay? I'll give the short version, then I'll give the long version. Finding your community online, a highly aligned online community, organizing them to first do online things and then do a very important offline thing, which is crowdfunding territory to live together with, right? That territory doesn't all have to be in one place, importantly. It could be even two people in a group house, okay? Or it's a small group house, but you know what I mean? Like two people in an apartment, or 10 people in a group house, or 30 people getting like a cul-de-sac of houses next to each other. Those pockets around the world, you start coalescing from a bunch of atomized nodes in the cloud to start being little pockets around on the earth. Go ahead.
No, the one thing that actually I felt like I didn't get is if you like think of how that sort of starts to play out, and you have these communities, and you're like, what if you bought land? What if you had a thing? Yep. And that I could see how that could be it. But then I guess the other part is like, wouldn't like the countries just say, well, you're not a part of that country,
sure,
or part of this country, you have to pay tax. Like when people try seasteading or like things like that.
And people can't just move to any country they want if that like location happens to be. Also, what are the percentage odds that those just, or how many of them at least just turn into like cults where there's the one guy at the top having sex with everybody else? And
if there's like a million, if there's like, I guess it depends.
Yeah, I guess if there's how many of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if there was a country, like a little island with like 50 people, then maybe it would be like that too, right?
You're going to see.
What does the government do? Like, wouldn't they just say like, yeah, this whole thing's not happening?
Yeah. So right. So several
visas canceled. Got to go home.
Totally. So first of all, the cult kind of thing is usually a group that's like isolated from the world. A cult does not want to talk to the rest of the world, and so on and so forth, right? Sense. This is more like, actually the early Americas were settled by lots of groups that wanted to be an example to the world, right? That's a huge difference, to be an example to the world. For example, like the Oneida Commune that was started in like northern New York, or there, if you think about Pennsylvania, William Penn's community, the Puritans, there were a bunch of, groups that went and settled the Midwest, and they were all essentially either religious or purpose-driven communities, okay? And they just recruited people there, and they wanted to build what they saw of as the better life and serve as an example to others, okay?
Okay.
So that is actually how America was built in the 1800s. There's a good book by Charles Nordhoff called Communistic Societies of the United States. Back in the 1800s, at that time, communistic did not mean communism. Like the word
commune.
It meant a commune.
Like a kibbutz or something.
Yeah, it was voluntary and opt-in. That's a key thing, right? As opposed to just take all the money. It was collective, but it was a voluntary collective. Very important.
So I guess maybe to start, you would have to just still pay the tax in this, but you're part of this other thing too?
Right, exactly. So essentially the thing is, there's a whole spectrum of levels of sovereignty.
Maybe your tax on the one could be tax deductible.
Yeah, so right. So now let's talk about this for a second. So basically, with respect to cryptocurrency first, let's do that first, and then let's come to this.
Okay.
With cryptocurrency, there are crypto and fiat exchanges, right? You can have Bitcoin, you can sell it for US dollars, and vice versa, Ethereum for, yen, all these different cryptocurrencies and fiat currencies around the world. And the existence of cryptocurrency does not mean, or it has not meant, that fiat law completely goes away, right? Nor that fiat currency completely goes away. There is an interface between them, which is complicated, and it varies in different countries. There's regulations like KYC, all this stuff. There's countries that have tried to ban it. There's countries that have now started to embrace it. There's states like Wyoming, which are allowed you to now incorporate on-chain using Ethereum. There's states like El Salvador that have adopted Bitcoin. So there's a spectrum of responses by legacy states, as well as ways that you can take this new system and start docking it to the old system. And over time, the old system, if it can't ban the new system, which it can't for various reasons that I'll get into, or at least it's hard for it to, because this is decentralized and there's people from around the world who believe in it, and it's built to be hard to ban. If the old system can't ban the new system, there's parts of it, or at least if all of it can't ban it, China might be able to ban it, other countries can't, then it starts sort of seeing some of the merit, bending to, flexing with, integrating with, or being transformed by the new system. Okay, that we're in the middle of now. We're about 10 years into that, right? We're about 20, 30 years into the internet. All the politicians are on the internet now. Have we noticed?
Yeah.
Every government website is on the internet. The internet,
They're all on True Social.
Yeah, well, or whatever, right? Yeah, exactly.
The ones we follow are anyways.
Fine, right? Yeah, so or Twitter or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so the new system, the internet, which was poo-pooed and dismissed, and Twitter is this totally ludicrous thing of tweeting your breakfast, and now every single politician in the entire world knows the importance of Twitter, right? That was 15 years. Okay, 15 years for
Yeah,
this.
I guess that's true.
It's not that long, right?
So it's the same thing again.
Well, right. So now if you talk about not cryptocurrencies and fiat currencies, but crypto countries and fiat countries, what does that exchange, what does that surface look like, right? And the surface looks complicated. Why? Because your crypto country, if it has 100,000 people, I've got a visual on my website. If you go to the network state in one image, 100,000 people, they could have piling up all over the world, right? You have this group over here, it's like a town of 1,000. Here's a group house of 50. You have little clusters and, all around the world. Some of them are in South America, some of them are in the Pacific Islands, et cetera, okay? And so let's say you're in 100 legacy countries.
How do you get recognized as a country?
I'm coming to that, yes, okay. So you have 100,000 people, they're spread over, let's say, 100 legacy countries, right? So first of all, you don't just have 4 directions to expand, you have 400, because you can go north, east, south, and west on all 100 of these clusters, okay? Just like Google's offices. Google has offices all around the world. You walk in, it's a piece of Google, you swipe a card, you can see it, right?
It's like an embassy.
Yeah, it's like an embassy. Starbucks, all around the world. You're in the same place in different places.
Right.
Right? We take that for granted.
True.
Right? So
there is probably countries where there's like a thing dividing we have Alaska with
like
Alaska,
Korea.
Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
Hawaii is 2,000 miles away from the United continental U.S., but we think of it as the same place because the people there think of themselves as part of the U.S. and the people in the U.S. think of Hawaii as part of it.
Yeah.
So really it's that software installed in people's heads that merges them, as well as people outside say, okay, that's U.S. territory versus not, right? So it's really just writing the right bits to people's heads that turn these borders real.
And you are more connected with the people in your online networks in a lot of ways than you are your neighbor.
With those neighbors, exactly,
Yeah,
right?
whatever.
Okay, so now, Indonesia, for example, if you've ever seen a map of Indonesia, lots of islands separated by ocean, okay, but they're the same country, okay. What if you have lots of islands separated by internet?
Yeah.
Now they can be the same country. At least think of themselves as such. Of course, for the first 1 or 5 or 10 or whatever years, they'll be made fun of. Everybody will laugh at them, right?
But and is it the UN or something that says like, okay, fine, you're a country?
I don't think the
how
UN
do you
as a
apply
whole.
to be a country?
Yes.
Because once you apply to be a country, I guess
Great
you
question.
could leave this. Like I moved to America, like I could be like,
Yeah.
I'm not a resident of America. I'm a resident.
Isn't that
of
the whole
this place.
sovereign citizens thing?
Well,
where you
so
always watch
sovereign
people get
citizens is
tased?
okay. Go ahead.
They always get tased.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's
Every video of a sovereign citizen is just them getting tased.
That's right.
At a courthouse.
Because a citizen can't be sovereign, right?
Right.
You need a collective to be sovereign, right? You and what army equals you and what country.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
That's a fundamental. So, the thing is, I think to caricature, the progressive doesn't get the concept of starting new countries, but the libertarian doesn't get why you need diplomatic recognition. You kind of need both. You need both the individual and the collective, and you need to fuse them in an interesting way, right? This is, crypto's also done this. Crypto has made progressives more libertarian and libertarians more progressive. Why progressives more libertarian? Well, you can start new currencies. This is a big thing. It's like an undeniable movement. Conversely, it makes libertarians more progressive because if you start any kind of crypto thing, you'll immediately realize, well, I need some kind of identity verification. I need some anti-fraud. I need to rebuild something that looks much like a state. Even if it's a V2 and it's an improvement on it, I need to rebuild certain of the aspects of the old world, right? So, in the best case, both parties kind of learn something from that. The old guy, the old world learns that the new world is possible. The new world realizes why the old world had certain things their way, right? Sometimes you can only learn it by trying it yourself. Okay. I still think progress happens. I don't think you come all the way full circle. I think it's more like a helix where you go up a level. It's cyclical on the X and Y plane, but the Z axis you're going up. Okay. But coming back to the sovereignty thing, first let me give some precedents. Okay. Tuvalu. .tv domain did a deal with GoDaddy. If you've ever registered something.tv, that Tuvalu is getting some money. Okay.
The country?
The country.
Yeah. I've never even heard that country, but I remember the .tv thing. That was a country.
Yes. Yeah. Colombia. Probably heard of Colombia. .co domain. They get some money for that. Okay. That's a deal that a country did with a company. Okay. Where it's like it's digital property. It's .co is generating revenue for it. It's TLD. It's got the rights to that. Nevada did a deal with Elon Musk for the Gigafactory. Okay. El Salvador has listed Bitcoin or recognized Bitcoin as a sovereign currency. Wyoming has recognized Ethereum-based companies, so-called DAOs, or not companies.
I have one of the city DAO plots of land.
Awesome. All right, so like
deeds or whatever.
That's right. So just like countries have put their some of their processes online, now they're starting to put some sovereigns are starting to put some of their processes on chain. Right? Both currencies and incorporation stuff. So those are examples. I just gave several examples of, quote, diplomatic recognition between a state or a country and a company or a currency, right? So it is not unprecedented. This has happened. These kinds of deals have happened. There's more I can rattle off. For example, Boeing in South Carolina, for example, or Amazon HQ2, right? Not that these are without controversy, but
Disney World's almost like its own
Disney World was
country.
like this, and they had conflict with DeSantis and so on and so forth on this, right? So the thing is that once you realize, okay, these kinds of deals are possible between cloud and land entities, right? Between companies and currencies and communities over here and cities and states and countries over here, right? Given that those deals are possible, that's like the crypto fiat exchange. That concept goes from just cryptocurrency and fiat currency to general interface between cloud entities and land entities.
Right.
Okay. And that actually now how does that brass tacks how does that happen here? Okay, so you have this community, as I mentioned. You've got 100,000 people worldwide. They're spread out over 100 legacy countries, fiat countries. Okay, and what happens is you've got effectively dual citizens everywhere, right? They're a citizen of
but they're only a resident. Oh yeah, I guess it depends on where you're a resident of.
Right, they're a citizen they're a citizen of, let's say, Fiji or El Salvador or the U.S. or what have you, but they're a netizen of this
netizen,
right? Of this proto network state, right? And so the thing is,
like I'm a netizen of like the Pornhub country.
Well, yeah. So some you'd be proud of, maybe some not so much.
It'd be like one of those ones where you go, yeah, don't put a stamp in that passport.
Yeah, maybe whatever.
But
okay,
I'm actually a netizen of Forjanistan.
Something like that. Okay, so you're a citizen of X and you're a netizen of Y, just like you've got fiat currency and cryptocurrency. You have a fiat passport and a crypto passport. Now, at first, these are like parallel systems, right? The crypto passport is not recognized offline. It's just some losers LARPing, whatever, right? If you can build the number of simultaneous LARPers into something that's not just one person or 10 or 100 or 1,000, but 10 or 100,000, and doing so over a long period of time, well, here's where things get interesting. Do you know how many countries in the UN are less than 100,000 people in size?
Oh, no, but I would guess probably
17.
It's about 12.
Oh,
pretty good. It's pretty good, right? How many are between 100,000 and a million?
Probably 50?
It's about 26,
okay.
right? So, and then if you say between a million and 10 million, it's like another 60, okay? So most countries are small countries.
Yeah.
Okay? There's only 14 countries in the UN that are over 100 million people.
Okay.
Most people live in big countries, but most countries are actually small countries.
Yeah.
So now, phrased this way, it doesn't seem that hard to build something in the cloud that has the number of people, the amount of land,
the tax base of one of these small places,
especially
countries. When you're having like big crypto billionaires come in,
or what have you, right? Exactly. You have talent, though, not just wealth. That's very important.
That was the smartest thing that I resonated so much, because you're like the same thing that happened in Canada. It's like everyone just has to leave. Like so much of like the talent does go outside the industry right now, and that describes like in Canada they leave the country, in entertainment they leave the industry, in like Silicon Valley they're leaving the like mainstream tech industry, like everything you think of. All of the best people you can think of that are doing the best things are like leaving the like main system.
Well, oftentimes it's. But like Canada, I remember, I don't know exactly when, but they were floating around the notion that they were gonna like take Turks and Caicos, and it was going to become a part of Canada.
Oh, really? I don't remember that.
It was like probably 15 years ago. I don't think it was got far enough, but I think get rid of Quebec. But everybody, like, they were like, we'll have a warm place that we can go.
Wow.
And it'll just be like Hawaii.
Union.
It'll just be like Hawaii.
Yeah.
Right? Like exactly what they do with Hawaii, except
Canadian Hawaii.
except not by force. Right.
Right.
But so could that theoretically, what you're saying with this nation state, where this cloud-based nation state or network state, would just go and say, hey, we have the resources now. If there's a country that would like to volunteer for this,
yes, but
you
here's
could
the thing.
become this country with the physical. We use your physical.
Oh,
space.
especially if it's like imagine it was like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and you, and like guys like that, and then you go and you're like, yo, Bermuda, we have, or like whatever, like, we have a deal that you can't refuse. We're gonna.
So I think something like that could work, but there's an very important asterisk or edit on that, which is one of the reasons that Bitcoin and Ethereum have the success they do is they have dual citizens in every country. Okay, you have American Bitcoiners, and you have Chinese Bitcoiners, and you have, French, and you have, Brazilian Ethereumers, and so on and so forth, right? So these are people who are native to that country, who understand that culture, who speak that language, who are friends there, and can argue on behalf of Bitcoin and Ethereum as Brazilians or as Americans or what have you, in the native idiom of their local culture. The fundamental concept is they're dual citizens, okay? This is also the same thing about any network state. Those 100,000 people have subgroups all around the world, right? And so the ideal would be that, let's say you have 1,000 Fijians, okay? People who are in small countries are particularly good to join network states. Why? Because if you have 1,000 Fijians making the case for why Fiji should recognize this network state, that is actually...
I see what you're saying, because you have like, let's say you have like 100,000 people there, and like 60,000 of them are like, yo, we want to have this.
Yeah, exactly. And crucially, if the more of them that are members of the country that you're seeking diplomatic recognition from, the better it will be, because it's not just some rich guys from out of town coming in and plunking down, right?
It's not like Bitcoin imperialism.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So the thing is, Bitcoin is everywhere and nowhere. And so as such, there's people from all walks of life in all different countries who have identified with it, right? So this is key for diplomatic recognition, is you need effectively dual citizens, like a citizen/netizen, who is making the case for why this benefits. Now, the thing about diplomatic recognition, by the way, is we don't usually think about it just like, 10 years ago, how much thought did you give to currencies? Not much. It wasn't like a dynamic thing, right? Now, everybody, at least everybody in crypto, knows that a currency has, 3 properties. It is medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account, okay? And in the same way, if the question of the 2010s was what is a currency, the question of the 2020s is either what is a country, or even better, what is a nation? Like, what is that unit? Because that thing in the cloud, even before it has any land, is a nation. It's a group of people that think of themselves as a people. That's one way to think about
ideologically.
Yeah, ideologically,
similar.
Culturally, exactly. Like the entire concept of nation, by the way.
I mean, on the internet, you talk about it all the time, like a community.
A community, that's right.
Most people, probably that's more important to them than whatever else.
Yes, though the thing is that a community is like, it is, if you take a community and you put it on steroids, you get a nation, okay?
Yeah.
And the reason is, a community could be like, I don't know, a Game of Thrones fan club or something like that. It's a loose affiliation. Okay, we all kind of like the show, something like that, right? Whereas a nation is basically, for example, you've heard the term nation state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Song by Propaganda.
Well, yeah, yes. It's
a song by some punk band.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
yeah, I think
right.
yeah.
So all right. So the term nation state, actually, nation and state are different. Do you guys know what the difference is?
No.
Okay, so the nation, it's like the same root word as natality. It's the people. It is like, for example, the Japanese nation. They have shared language and culture, ethnicity. They're like a group, right?
And the state's the government?
The state's the government. So they're as different as labor and management.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you can have the state over the Japanese people be like America in 1946 was like occupying, Japan after World War II. So there's an American state above the Japanese nation. Okay,
Oh.
this is an old.
So it's nation state when they're both the same?
Yeah, so the old concept of the nation state was different ethnic groups should be able to have their own government.
Oh.
That is what it used to mean, right? And that's what gave rise to what we now call France, and we now call Germany, we now call Italy.
France was when they're like gay people should have their own government.
Well, so France actually, the thing is that basically what we now think of as France, most people in what we now think of as France did not speak French before the French Revolution.
Really?
They spoke other languages, like other dialects, things that are kind of adjacent to French. And what happened was the unified government of France installed new software effectively into everybody's brains and just uniformized it.
This has happened.
But here's the curriculum for all schools, and just
yes, exactly. So just leveled it out, and there's both good and bad of that. Obviously, these old cultures were kind of like erased. The good was you now had a large unit of people who all spoke the same language, all had the same values because they've all been educated since early. Okay, they all transact in the same currency. And so then France could go and crush all these folks. So that actually led to German unification, it led to Italian unification. And so this was like the kind of, get big sort of imperative of the 1700s,
And
1800s.
you have that as like a company culture in Silicon Valley probably too, right?
Right, because if these small little groups didn't group up into a nation state, they'd get crushed or they'd be forcibly
Or infighting.
Yeah, or infighting, right? So this stopped in a sense civil war because now you had these giant states, but it meant more interstate war because these guys could fight each other, right?
And they're bigger.
And they're bigger, And one way of seeing that, there's a UN country called San Marino. It's this tiny thing of 30,000 people that's in what we think of as Italy. And you're like, what is this thing? Why does it exist on the map? And the answer is it sheltered Garibaldi during Italian unification. And so Garibaldi said, okay, I don't have to fold you into all of Italy. You can just kind of be your own thing. So they maintain their sovereignty to the present day. They're like one of the 3 enclaves in the world. The other is like Vatican City and Lesotho.
How many people live there?
30,000 people.
Oh, crazy.
See how small that is?
Yeah,
right?
tiny.
So that's tiny. That's like, there's a town on Long Island that's probably bigger than that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a UN country. So my point is that these UN countries are often, many of them are quite small, much smaller than you might think. They have their status for historical reasons. And so a sufficiently motivated cloud community it'll get told no the first time, the second time, probably the 5th time, the 10th time, right?
Told no when you say they're going to make some sort of formal pitch to the UN?
Well, not to the UN as a whole. So assume the UN as a whole is very slow moving. But any individual country has a list of those other entities that it diplomatically recognizes. Now, the reason we don't think about this too much is, just as I said with currencies, we thought of currencies as basically being fixed, and now they've become incredibly dynamic. These constants have become variables over the last 10 years. It's not just currency, it's fiat or cryptocurrency, okay? Things can conceivably go from nothing to becoming a global currency that's happening in our lifetime, as hard as it is. So in the same way, diplomatic recognition, we usually think of as a 0 or 1 thing. Either something is recognized by all the 190-something countries, UN countries of the world, or none of them. We think of it as 0 and 1. But there are countries in the middle, like Israel, like Taiwan, right, which have some diplomatic recognition from some places, but not others.
That's a pretty good point. Yeah,
Right?
because you're just like, Taiwan doesn't see themselves as not recognized.
Yes, but China leans on countries
And they
to
go,
not-
oh, you're not a country, and be like, we are though.
That's right. So China
Yeah.
leans on places to not recognize them, right? And so what you might do is basically you'd actually, there's actually this book called Invisible Countries and another one called Imagined Communities, both worth reading, right? Invisible Countries talks about all these quasi countries that are kind of hanging out. They're less recognized in Israel and Taiwan, but they're more recognized than something out of nowhere. So like Abkhazia, Catalonia, the Basques, Kurdistan, all these different groups.
Yeah, Catalonia is a big one, right? They're constantly trying to secede.
Right, exactly. And so the Catalonians at least some of the Catalonian nationalists like the concept of the network state. Why? Because historically, you've only really had 2 options. Either A, they could be sort of dominated by Spain, right? Or B, there's some insurgency, Irish type thing, and it's, that's super messy in its own way, right? So how do they preserve their language and culture and so on? Well, one possible alternative is C, a network state, where Catalonians start crowdfunding territory around the world, and they give up on this land and this state, but maybe they have some land and some state of their own, okay? Now, this is actually the motivation for the network state comes from Theodor Herzl's book, Theodor Herzl wrote a book called Der Judenstaat, which translates as the Jewish state, and that was the book that led to the formation of Israel. And he was basically making a very similar case to the Jewish people, and he said, look, we are a nation, we're a group of people, but we don't have a state, right? We're a stateless nation. And how can we get one? And he was actually like, look, we're in modern parlance, he'd be like a tech founder. He was talking about how, even in 1897, he's talking about the death of distance. He's like, we have steamships, we can move across large distances, so we should pick from the best spot. Should we do it in Argentina or Palestine? And other places that were considered later were like Madagascar or Birabidzen, So they were... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you should have picked Argentina.
Well, maybe. Yeah, exactly. So there's
we got a lot smoother.
Might have gone smoother, right? Exactly. So, but it's hard to know what would happen. Maybe there would have been some local backlash or whatever, But
too many Nazis. They're going, no, we gave her.
Who knows, right? But that was definitely a hinge point in history, right?
Yeah.
Point being, this is something where the cloud community went and found land, right? Now, I'm not a utopian. I'm not saying that everything always goes well or what have you. I am saying, one of the things about the network state is I try to take inspiration from the best of different kinds of states, right? So Israel was started by a book, and it had this kind of reverse diaspora that found land and was flexible on where they went to, so long as they could get a state somewhere, okay? India was started non-violently, okay? It got independence non-violently. That's definitely something to emulate. Singapore has like a CEO founder, and they built like this amazing economic engine from nothing, right? And America, of course, too many influences name, but of course it's got its constitution, and that's and all this tradition of jurisprudence and so on.
So when you're whenever you're starting something from scratch, it's so much easier to just like
import.
Yeah, because you just like get all this, like whatever you're doing, you get all these clutter, even if it's like a company of like an employee that you're like, he's been working here, we can't really fire him. Whatever it is, it's so much easier.
Yeah, you guys can't fire each other.
And what do you do about like a military, like when you need
good question?
Because I imagine that's a question that probably
so this is something people ask. I'll write about this in the V2, but two or three things about this. First is Bitcoin and Ethereum have guarded hundreds of billions of dollars without a military, right? They managed to do that via pure encryption, mainly because a military isn't actually valuable to steal from them. You can point a tank at something, but no amount of violence can solve certain kinds of math problems. That's Assange's line, right? So to decrypt these networks and take the money from all these people around the world, right? When you take a look at that image of the network state, right, it looks like Bitcoin miners or Ethereum, stakers or what have you for a reason. It's decentralized. If you have, take my example of 100,000 people in 100 pockets around the world, how are you going to nuke that?
Yeah,
you can't.
You can't. And this actually goes back
to... You have to just nuke their, like, servers.
But you can't. They don't have a server. It's on just individual computers all over the place,
exactly. Right? So the thing is, why was the internet built? Going all the way back to the very, 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 very beginning of the internet, why was it built?
Was it a military thing?
Just in case there's a nuclear bomb, just so they can
It was meant to have a communications network that could resist a nuclear attack.
Gotcha.
Okay? So that was the original motivation.
So it's almost like Vietnam or something, where it's like it's hard to win those wars because everyone's just everywhere in little tiny pockets. There's no central things.
Like that. And, in some sense, sometimes a technology is so important that it shapes the state itself. For example, the Great Wall of China is this gigantic thing, right, that you can see it from space that is like an actual gigantic physical border, right? And, the invention of oceanic navigation allowed states to become like, ocean-spanning empires. The British Empire was not possible before you had ships that could, go across oceans. That was a pretty hard thing to build, right? So sometimes technology changes the shape of a state itself. And as the internet rises, and unfortunately, you get more and more showdowns between nuclear powers, right? You're having the U.S. versus Russia, the U.S. versus China. You're having the risk of, not the risk, the presence of hot war between nuclear powers. That was unthinkable when we were growing up, right?
Yeah.
The issue is, if you just flip a coin, you keep flipping a coin, you keep rolling the dice, eventually something bad will happen. And so, or could happen, let's put it like that, right? And so on the other side of that, a network state is nuke resistant for several reasons. First is, it's just distributed, okay? And most people don't think about it this way. They just think of a nuke as the biggest, baddest gun. And so therefore someone will submit, right? But that'll only work if it's like a concentrated group of people in one known place, right? If it's a group of folks that are distributed all around the world, if you nuke them, you're nuking a bunch of your allies too, right? Yeah. You're nuking a building in the middle of nowhere. You're killing all these other people around who are your allies, number one. So it's not target enough. Number two is, a network state doesn't need to actually have every node on the map being revealed. It can be encrypted.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the secret state. And in fact, you go from secret society to secret states because you can't hit what you can't see. And so now it's something where your private keys...
So everyone's like a ninja, basically.
Well, right, so you go from private property... I mean, basically, put it like this. If you go to the top of some, skyscraper in New York, whatever, and you look over all of those windows, how many of them have you ever been in?
Yeah, like very few, yeah.
Very few, right? In a sense...
Maybe 40, 50.
This guy's bragging.
All right, sure.
I guess I didn't get the invite because I've been to none of them.
Sure. So most folks, only a small fraction, okay? Perhaps present companies. So your passport actually to the U.S. only allows you to really walk the streets of New York. And maybe, you're really on the ground floor. Most of what you're seeing is inaccessible territory. You need a second private passport, whether it's a hotel room key or an apartment key card to get in, or an office card to get into those little spots there, right? So most of that territory is actually off limits. It's invisible to you. You don't even know what's behind that. Extend that, right?
I do, but he doesn't, yeah.
You do, okay, right. So if we take the premise that most of what is in cities nowadays is digitally gated private space. Digitally gated because it's a key card.
Yeah.
Private space because you can't see in it.
It already is, yeah.
Right? If that's true, if most of what's in cities is digitally gated private space, we can invert that and say digitally gated private space constitutes most of what's in cities.
Dude, it does make so much sense, because if you're like, when you walk by and you see, oh, look at that big thing, that's Google. Like, why wouldn't you be like, oh, look at that big thing? Like, Stuytown is like legitimately, whereas there's 5,000 units. You just be like, oh, that's part of like, whatever, 8chan world or whatever.
Exactly, right. And or you don't even have a logo. You've intentionally made it opaque to the world.
You
right?
have like a key thing,
You have a key thing, and it's just opaque to the world because why show it off? It's just like a blank facade, attracts no attention, right? And many...
I guess if people move their girls in, they probably won't leave it blank facade for a while.
Well, it really depends.
Try to soup it up a little.
Yeah, it depends. And the thing
Start out when it's just the boys, it'll probably be...
Well, so like the entire San Francisco culture of being a slob, okay, has a benefit, right? Which is, it's like, you can't tell the difference between a really wealthy person and just like an average guy. You're walking down the street and you're just wearing really the same clothes.
Yeah.
It is the opposite. It's inconspicuous consumption as opposed to conspicuous consumption. Why? You're almost like visually encrypting, okay? In the cloud, you might be 50 feet tall, right? But on the land, why attract attention?
Yeah.
Especially in an untrusted zone, if there's folks who might want to mug you or whatever, right? They don't even know you have anything. So it's like, like you're invisible to predators or things like that, right? And I actually think that the world that we're in today is actually an atypical world in the sense of how visible it is. Okay. Signal and WhatsApp are just a harbinger of us moving back into encrypted, illegible environments. All the kids nowadays, what do? They have a Finsta and a Rinsta. Have you heard that term?
Finsta, yeah, like the fake Instagram.
Exactly. So on their fake Instagram, they use a fake name and they're their real self. On the real Instagram, they use their real name and they're their fake self. So the real Instagram, they're in their...
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's like the one where if you're getting a job and your employer goes, "What's your Instagram?" You go, "Here you go."
Here you go. Exactly. And it's in Sunday Best, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And on, Finsta is, all the stuff that is... But crucially, one of the things they do is they use a search-resistant identity on Finsta, right? Why? Because...
What does that mean? Like
no name.
Something that can't be Googled.
Yeah.
It can't be linked to them via Googling. Only their friends know about it. It's a 12-follower account just for their friends.
Yeah, it's like a private account, no name. Okay.
That's right. And or if the name, it's like a made-up name. It's this Satoshi Nakamoto style name, right?
Do you know who he is?
I have a guess.
You have a guess?
Yeah. But
nice. That'd be cool.
He's probably not alive. But
really?
Yeah. In the community, people think he's Hal Finney. Who's Hal Finney? If you don't know who Hal Finney is,
I don't.
Yeah, okay. So he's an amazing cryptographer who unfortunately passed away, and so on. The thing is, I can say that, and nobody will believe me. It's actually great, And one thing that's interesting is, Satoshi's pseudonymity was actually itself a form of decentralization. You know why?
And that's the guy who started Ethereum, right?
No. That's Vitalik.
That's Vitalik.
Oh, Vitalik. I've seen Vitalik on a lot of things.
Yeah. So
you guys are having a good laugh there.
No.
The YouTube comments are just lighting up.
You guys had a nice little chuckle there.
Is this live? It's not live.
No.
All right.
But we're keeping that in.
Okay. So
this guy doesn't even know all the every Bitcoin.
No. Whatever. It's fine. It's just funny. So the whole concept of Bitcoin, right, is like the mining and the stuff is everywhere, so it's everywhere and nowhere. You can't shut it down very easily. A non or less obvious point is that Satoshi Nakamoto choosing to be pseudonymous rather than using his quote real name. A better term than real name, by the way, is like state name, right, or official name. It's like
government name.
Government name, exactly, right? Because the non-obvious part is pseudonymity is itself a form of decentralization because your government name is like a global identifier. Okay, given Ryan Long, okay, someone can punch that into a database like Google or anything else and pull up all of these records on you. Now, your name is not unique. There's going to be others who have that name, right?
There's a bit of an issue with this Jeopardy champion.
That Jeopardy champion's screwing up my SEO.
Is that right? Okay, fine. But the thing is that never before in human history has it been possible to pull up every snippet of anybody can stalk anybody with given their real name, right?
Yeah.
And so that is something where another term for a name is a handle, if you ever heard that term. So think of it as like literally a handle on a file, file cabinet. People can just pull out the file,
right?
On it, right? And so the alternative to that, to having this name that's at the center of 1,000 databases, that's the primary key to look up all this information, is to start totally afresh, right? Have a node over here, Satoshi Nakamoto, that has nothing attached to it.
Yeah.
Okay. And now any attachments to it are those that you have consciously sought out. Satoshi Nakamoto set up Bitcoin Talk, and he set up like his code base and so on and so forth. Now, of course, the what budded off of that became this gigantic network, and all this energy, this is swirling around this, but the man walks unscathed.
Yeah, because there was nothing linked it to him, right?
There's nothing linked. These are two totally, the pseudonym network.
Like an avatar.
I remember seeing
avatar,
something
yeah.
Vitalik saying when they gave him all the, what was the Shiba Inu or something when they tried to promote the thing, and then so he donated it all because he didn't want it, but he's like, I heard him talking about it, and he's like, I had to go access it. He's like, I had to call my parents up, and then he's like, they had half of my key, and I had to go buy a laptop that had never been online before, and then he's like, I go online for the 1 second, like do this stuff. He's like, throw out the laptop, like all just to maintain that, like I guess air gap, right?
Yes.
Where you're like, there's no connection ever.
Right. Yeah. So that's like if you want to be. I do think about this sometimes because if Vitalik takes that kind of precaution, and I also take significant precautions, we do need to work on crypto usability.
Yeah.
Like